Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of Nature and Nurture podcast, hosted by me. I am Hongmei Li Bailey, a bee biologist at the North Carolina State University, studying honeybee genetics, behavior, and physiology. I am passionate about fascinating science and facts of social insects, such as bees, wasps, ants, termites, and more. Even though they're tiny insects, their social structures can be as complicated as the human society. I hope this podcast will share incredible stories with you from outstanding scientists in the world who are studying social insects every day, their genes, their behavior, and their environment, so that we can learn more information about nature and nurture. Episodes of our podcast are published on SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, and Google Music Play. Please subscribe for new updates if you like our stories. If you would like to suggest our next topic, next speaker, give comments about our show and production, please tweet me at insect_sciences on Twitter or send your message to naturenurturepodcast@gmail.com. Today is our third episode, Learn About Honeybees with Dr. Tom Seeley. Professor Seeley is a Horace White professor in the Department of Neurobiology and Behavior at the Cornell University. His fascinating research on honeybee swarming behavior, house hunting, dance language, and their social life can trace back to the last 42 years. He has published 217 scientific papers and 4 outstanding books since 1974. His new book is called Following the Wild Bees, The Craft and Science of Bee Hunting.
I'm so delighted and thrilled to introduce our guest speaker for our third episode is Dr. Tom Seeley. Hi, Tom. Do you want to say hi?
Yes, good afternoon, Hongmei. How are you?
Good. How are you?
That's good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm
So,
fine, thank you.
do you want to also say hi to our listeners? Because there will be people listening to our podcast.
No, I just want to imagine I'm talking to you. Thank you.
Okay. That's good. I know you're doing give talks or tours for your new book, which just published recently. So you just had a trip from Denmark, coming back from Denmark and Germany. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So I wasn't talking so much about my new book there as I was talking about the research we're doing with the wild honeybee colonies and what we're learning about how colonies of honeybees that are left alone, not managed and not treated by beekeepers, how they're evolving resistance to the viruses and the mites that are killing many honeybee colonies. So that was the main subject of my talks in Denmark and Germany.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's also related to your recent paper. Just one paper to look at genetic diversity of the feral bees, which is comparing the feral bee to managed bees.
There's that paper, and then what's an even more important paper is one where we compared museum specimens and modern specimens of the bees that are living in this research forest that Cornell University has.
Uh-huh.
And you're welcome, John. And that enables us to compare what's happened genetically to those bees between 1978, before the varroa mite arrived, and 2010, when we collected another sample of those bees. And we found that the bees have changed dramatically. And there's some 634 loci on the bee's genome, across the genome, and this is a whole genome analysis, I should emphasize, where 634 loci where the genetics have changed very strongly, almost certainly due to selection. And the other
Yeah.
thing that we learned was that from looking at the mitochondrial genes and how much diversity they had lost, that the colony went through a big bottleneck or genetic bottleneck sometime between 1977 and 2010, and that's almost certainly had to do with the heavy mortality produced by the varroa mite and the viruses that it transmits.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that totally makes sense because when the varroa mite infestation appeared in the United States, in 1980s, that probably created, a lot of pressure on the natural selection.
Because the beekeepers certainly knew that if they didn't treat their colonies, most of the colonies would die, and that's evidently what happened in nature as well. But the interesting thing is that the bees have enough genetic variation that they were able to evolve resistance to the mites, and so the population is now back in the wild. The population of colonies is now back at the level it was before varroa. That's pretty neat.
Yeah. So the nature is doing their own, effort to select the best traits for their survival.
That's right.
So I actually just went to the Harlan Apiculture Society meeting in Bowling Green, Kentucky. So during the meeting, there's also, I can see people really wanted to push the movement to select more mite-resistant bees. So, for example, there's the mite-biting bees from breeding from Greg Hahn's lab at Purdue University, and also a lot of queen breeding now. But also people are really eager to see if we can find or select better lines out of the feral bees or the wild population as well.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good idea to try to get improved bees, not only through artificial selection but also through natural selection. Because what we're finding is that when you do artificial selection, you select for a very specific mechanism of disease resistance. With natural selection, you actually get not just one mechanism of disease resistance. We're finding that these wild colonies of honeybees have multiple mechanisms of resistance to the varroa.
Yeah. It's probably natural selection is working on a broader genetic content compared to the artificial, selection. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah. So, did you have a chance to do any bee hunt in Europe?
No, I didn't. And no, these were pretty quick trips. But this fall, I will be going to Scotland, in the Highlands of Scotland, and I'll take along my bee hunting equipment, and I hope to do some up there. Bee hunting's a lot of fun. It's another way for anybody that's interested in bees.
Yeah, so let's briefly introduce what's bee hunt for listeners, because there may be some people, they don't know what that is.
Yes.
Would you like to describe it in a few sentences? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Bee hunting is another way to have fun with bees, and it's a process where it's a lot like geocaching, where you're going out into nature and you're trying to find something that's hidden away. But instead of with geocaching, you find something that was hidden by a human. With bee hunting, or geocaching, you could call it, you're actually going out and looking for a wild nest of honeybees. That's your treasure. That's the natural treasure. And
right.
It's the process.
Exactly.
It's an old sport or activity, pastime, whatever you want to call it. It used to be quite commonly done. Rural folks often did it just as a way to get honey. But today I'm advocating doing it just for the fun of being out and doing something with the bees besides, in addition to doing beekeeping. And the way the process works is you go to a patch of flowers, you capture some bees at the flowers, you introduce them to using a little device called a bee box.
Yeah. Make
you
sure you catch some honeybee foragers, not other bees.
That's right. You have to know what a honeybee is. You capture some honeybee foragers in this little box,
Right.
and then you put the box, inside the box, a little square of comb from honey made by honeybees. You put in it sugar syrup and close up the box with the bees and the comb, and the bees will find the comb, and you've now introduced the bees to a wonderful food source. And when you open the box up, 5 minutes later, the bees come out, they fly home, and you see what direction they go, and then when they come back, you put paint marks on some of the bees, and so you can time how long they're away. And from knowing how long they are away, you can infer the distance to their nest. And so knowing the direction and the distance, you can start to zero in on the location of their bee tree home. Generally, it's called following the bee line. The bee line is the track home for the bees, and as a bee hunter, you move your little bait station closer and closer to their home and zero in on their home. And
I think it's a great sport, because it exercise not only your brain by observation and figure out where bees going, but also exercise your muscles, because sometimes you may have to run to follow the bees. So
both
ways will give you I plan to do that with my daughter. We'll see if we can find any wild fairy colonies in the Raleigh area.
Oh, I guess you will. I found them wherever I've gone. Yeah, there are many more. A lot of people think that all the wild colonies were killed off, and as we talked about already a little bit, the population of wild colonies, the number of wild colonies, was reduced back in the 1990s, but they were not wiped out by any means, and they're in fact coming back.
Yeah, but sometimes also there are people, they purchase package bees, but they could swarm or abscond.
Right.
So would that be also possible? They go to the wild trees and forests and establish colonies as well?
Definitely. One thing I want to stress is that the relationship that a person has to the bees is different when they're bee hunting as opposed to doing beekeeping. When you're a beekeeper, as you know, you open up a hive, and there in front of you are hundreds, if not thousands of bees, and they're all anonymous. But when you go bee hunting, you're dealing with a handful of bees, the bees that are coming to your little feeding station, and they're all labeled with paint marks. You've labeled them with paint marks for individual identification. So you're now looking at bees, you're relating to bees as individuals, and you see that some bees work quickly, some bees work slowly, some bees are nervous, some bees are bold. You really have a different feel you develop a feel for the individuality, for the personality of worker bees. And,
exactly.
It's fun. It's a lot like, it's much like bird watching. When you go out bird watching, you don't go out to get something. You don't want to bring something home except for nice memories or experiences. And it's the same with bee hunting. You're not going out to you're going out to have pleasurable and interesting and beautiful experiences out in nature.
Experience. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's you get close to like fewer bees, and you can, have a more, as you said, look at, more observe their personalities, because each bee is different, and you get to know them better instead of, thousands of bees that are in front of you. Then you maybe get lost, or you're eager to find only the queen. Yeah.
That's right. And you're not you're not disturbing the bees. So I've never been stung bee hunting, but when you're doing beekeeping, of course, you're opening up their nest. You are basically disturbing the honey. So they tend to be more defensive. So that's another feature of bee hunting. The bees are happy with you.
Right. Yeah. And without hurting the bees. And so in Africa, there's also a type of bird It's called the Greater Honey Guide bird.
Yeah.
There's actually a new study to show those birds are actually helping people to find honeybee colonies, and then for the reward they get to eat the bee wax.
That's right.
Which
yeah,
is a really good story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's another way to do bee hunting, to enlist the aid of one of the guide birds. That's advanced technique, I'd say. And that operates in Africa. Unfortunately, we don't have those honey guides in North America, alas.
Yeah. Yeah, so for your new book, I know you have this new book, Following the Wild Bees, The Craft and Science of Bee Hunting. It's really great. I'm really happy to see you have another book, just published. So do you have any, do you want to tell people where people can buy this book?
Oh, yeah, it's published by Princeton University Press, and they've distributed it widely. You can either go to the Princeton University Press website and order a copy, or you can just go to Amazon and buy a copy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a book written that it's written not just for people interested in beekeeping. It's really written for anybody that likes the natural world and likes to go out and engage with the natural world. As I say, it's analogous to bird watching, but in this case, you're bee watching.
Yeah. Yeah, like now we have a lot of young people are playing Pokemon Go. So this will be another bee Go game.
Exactly.
Well, you can't see Pokemons or anything. Yeah, to see if you can find any bees. That would be really fascinating.
Yeah, and this is one that bee hunting is, it might sound really difficult, but the tools are very simple, as I describe in the book. They're very simple tools. It's not a costly sport. It's a sport you can do in a group too, where you have a bunch of people and then you have a bunch of eyes watching at the same time. And it's a real thrill. I mean, I'm not a hunter. I'm not a deer hunter or a squirrel hunter or anything like that. But I do enjoy this bee hunting, and I think it gives you some of the same excitement of being a hunter where you're a game hunter, as you're going out, you're trying to find an animal, and the thrill, the chase is a thrill, even if there's no kill at the end of a bee hunt, but the chase is exciting in itself.
And also in some part of the world, they even have tournaments, is that right, for bee hunting? Because I was talking to Perry Kiesman, she's my coworker. We were talking about the bee hunt, and she mentioned there may be even, tournaments in Europe or some area for bee hunting.
I don't know about that, but that would not surprise me. And I know that in Eastern Europe and in southern Russia, there are large forest areas where there are individuals that do this bee hunting for a living. They'll use this bee hunting to find bee trees, and then they will make a door in the side of the bee tree, and then they will once a year they will harvest some honey from the nests that they find in the trees. These are in Borkatistan and also in Poland, and so this is it's a kind of for these individuals it's not so much of a contest or a sport as it's their livelihood. This is how they find called tree beekeeping, and so that's but those people are also very good bee hunters because that's how they find these trees.
Can we talk about some of your earlier work as well?
Sure.
So I first know about your work is at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, because a good friend of mine, Zhong Sophia Liang, she was doing a collaboration with you on the scouting bees to look at the molecular basis of scouting bees, and then you came to our department and gave a really good talk. on the honeybee social behavior and social life. So totally, I'm so amazed and, just attracted by your research on the fundamental understanding of honeybee social behavior, including their foraging, scouting behavior, the collective decision making, the dance language, and communication. I know you have worked on a lot of different type of behavior. So which one is your favorite?
Yeah, I think my favorite is probably the investigations of how honeybees choose a home, and this is the process
when they're swarming.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's the kind of a core information delivered in the book of the Honeybee Democracy book.
Right. Yes, that's right.
Great.
That's what Honeybee Democracy is all about. That very process.
Yeah. Like with because I know that's actually many years of work to be able to demonstrate how the bees can make their collective decisions on which home to go and where's their next, house to choose, and what are the criteria and what's the process look like. But at the same time, you also use their dance language.
Yes, the heart of the investigation, or I should say the start of the investigation, was to, as in many of my investigations, well, the starting point was to just to observe the process. And I was actually not the first person to observe this in this house hunting process. That was first observed and described by a German scientist named Martin Lindauer. He did this back in the 1940s and 1950s, but he did not have sophisticated equipment. There was no video equipment or anything like that. So he couldn't look at the process in great detail. So in the mid-90s, I started by just recording the bees on a swarm that were performing waggle dances. A swarm of bees is the reproductive unit of a colony. That's 10,000 bees that's left with the queen, left their original hive, formed a cluster in a tree, and then they conduct a search for a new home. And what you see is that the bees of the 10,000 bees, there's a few percent, so a few hundred bees that function as scouts. They fly off the swarm. All of the rest of the bees sit quietly on the swarm, waiting for the scouts to go through their decision-making process. And fortunately, the bees, when the scout bees, after they've flown out and found various possible hollow trees and things like that as places to live, they come back and report their discoveries by performing waggle dances. And they do that on the surface of the swarm, so one can observe and video record their behaviors and thus follow their debate or discussion about the possible home sites and their choice of which one is the best.
Right. So the net scout bees would come back home and dance, to promote the location they like or they choose. And so they recruit other bees to go to the same location and check it out. And if those other bees like it, they will do the same dance to vote for that net scout.
Right. And a key thing is that the better the site, the more strongly a bee advertises that site. So the sites that are the best site attracts the most interest. And it's a lot like it really is a democratic process of decision making. You have different candidate sites. You have different bees supporting the different candidates. And one key thing, though, is that bees adjust their promotion, their advertising of a site as a function of the goodness of that site. So sites that are not very good don't get promoted very strongly by the bees that have visited them, but the sites that are excellent are advertised very, very vigorously. So the interest builds up most strongly and quickly at the best site.
Yeah. And for me, the amazing thing is that they have to make a decision fairly quick because when they swarm, they are on a temporary, bushes or a tree branch. So within a day and a half, right, approximately, they have to make a decision where is the next home.
Yes, that's right. When they're hanging on that tree branch, they're vulnerable to being caught in bad weather. And
yeah, if it was raining or bad weather, right?
Yeah, that can be a prolonged rainy period. Can be the death of a swarm of bees because they cannot fly if it's cool and rainy. And there's no food collected, they can starve. So they try to make this decision usually in a day or two, sometimes even within one day. Sometimes it takes several days, but time is of the essence.
Oh, it could take several days for them. Oh, okay. Yeah, so, except the dance language for, nesting, scout, foraging, there are actually several other types of dances within the honeybee colony. So there's, there is waggle dance, round dance for foraging, but there's also treble dance to motivate other bees to get to work. But also there's grooming dance, because I was reading about grooming behavior, and I just, crossed through your other paper on grooming dance and grooming behavior.
Yes, bees do have this special signal. We call it the grooming invitation dance or grooming invitation signal. And it's because bees, there are parts of a worker bee's body that she cannot groom or clean on her own. These are the places, this is the low parts on her back, between her wing joints. She can't get a leg up there and scratch and clean that. And also at her waist, in the region between the thorax and the abdomen. She cannot clean that area very well. So if a piece of dirt or a bit of a speck of wax falls onto her while she's in the nest and is starting to and it feels uncomfortable to her, she will perform this little grooming invitation dance where she shakes her body back and forth, using some of the same motions that she would use to groom herself. But she does this grooming motions of rocking her body back and forth vigorously. She does it for 5 or 10 seconds, and that attracts other bees to come over and help her.
Does that happen a lot in the colonies?
Yeah, if you looked inside a glass-walled observation hive, you'd probably see a bee doing the grooming invitation dance every minute or so. Not every bee is doing it all the time, but if you look across the comb with a lot of bees on it, you pick out one doing it here, one doing it there. It's not an uncommon sight.
Yeah. So because I think if we, like back to the beginning, the topic on the mite resistance. So for grooming behavior and out-grooming, it actually can be really useful and a really a good trait to select for bees who have mite resistance, because other bees tend to groom more and they can get rid of the mite on the bee's body.
Yeah, and one of the reasons it's so effective, the grooming behavior, is that when one bee grooms a mite off another bee, if she bites the leg of that bee, she bites the leg of the mite, I believe, dies rather quickly. And so it's like, I don't know if it's quite correct to say that the mite bleeds to death, but I believe the evidence is that once even just one leg is bitten by a bee, one mite's leg is bitten by a bee, the mite dies soon thereafter.
So even with the one leg, got removed by bee biting, that can actually, have an impact on the mites activity.
Yes, that's right. And that's because the mites are arachnids like spiders, and they move their legs by hydraulic mechanisms, so they need blood pressure inside their bodies. And so if a leg is ripped off or chewed off, they lose their hydraulic pressure.
They have blood leaking. Yeah, the pressure system is broken. Yeah. So I also want to talk about different types of foragers. So we know there are, forager bees who collect pollen, who collect nectar, but also there may be bees collecting water.
Yes. And okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that yes, different worker bees tend to specialize on different materials that they collect. The bees that are water collectors, for example, they largely collect just water, and they will.
So do they only collect water? Do we consider them as a division of labor? They only collect water, or they can do other nectar and things as well?
They can switch over. I've seen them switch over to collecting pollen, but it's not very often.
Okay.
Generally, the water collectors I've watched are pretty focused on water, and I think you can see the logic of that or why that is. It is because when a colony needs water, it's overheating. It needs to have bees that are ready to go into action, that know where to go to get water. And so the water collectors that we've studied are bees that when the colony doesn't need water, they stand down near the entrance. They're quiet, inactive bees. But then when the bees that are working in the brood nest need water, either to make the food for the larvae or to cool the nest, they go down near the nest entrance. They take water from the water collectors, and that stimulates the water collectors to go out and get more water. And so those bees are like a little, kind of like a they're like firemen. They're there ready to jump into action in an emergency.
To put out the fire, or the nurse bee can tell the water foragers we need more water for the brood and for the colony. And you also have a new paper, actually, just published now on the water collection and the water stress to the colony.
Yes, that's right. And that's why I can describe, that's what I can say with some confidence. These water collectors are specialized on that job, because we did that study with a colony in a greenhouse, so we could limit the water sources available to a colony of bees. And so in our study, we could label every bee that came to the water source in the greenhouse. It was a little dish of water. And we would label each bee that collected water, and then we would see, but we would also put out pollen in the greenhouse so the bees could have pollen and so they could get other foods. And they had plenty of honey in their nest. That's why we didn't have to put out nectar. But we would see that the bees that collected water would not collect pollen, and they would, when the colony needed water, they would go out and get water. When the colony didn't need water, the water collectors would stand quietly in the hive, ready to be activated when need be. So it's a neat little system they have. Yeah,
it's really neat. So I also read other paper, not only water, but bees sometimes also collect salt. They could use the salt to use it for their colony.
Right. Look, bees are vegetarians, and like almost every animal that feeds on plant matter, they are salt deprived, sodium deprived. So yes, bees are going out and getting sodium, just like so many, really almost like moose and any animal that's eating plant matter doesn't have much. There's not much sodium in plants. So these are vegetarians, and they need their salt.
So where do they get the salt?
They in nature they would get salt from places. There are some. Well, there's brackish water, which can have a higher concentration of salt than clean running water. Along the seashore, there are, of course, there's saltwater spray that can be collected. It's a really good question where bees I think they can get some of the sodium that they need from pollen, but not very much. So maybe that's a really good question. In nature, where can they get the salt? I guess
yeah.
I don't have a good answer.
I think part of it they could get it from the pollen or plants, but they could be pretty low concentration.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to study what the salt do for their physiology and development.
Yeah.
So, okay. So maybe we'll try to wrap up and jump to kind of last question for you, because I don't want to keep you for too long. So,
I was going to say, I should leave in about a minute, actually. So I'll have to do this quickly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Just can you give one sentence to give to the future, young generation who wants to study social insects and bees? What advice will you give?
I would say, go out into nature, look at the ants, look at the bees, look at the wasps, and find a group that you just really like. And whatever, you like the way they look, you like what they're doing, their behavior. Just step one is to find a group of organisms that you're just passionate about. So
just do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Tom. So nice talking to you. Okay. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That concludes our third episode on the honeybee behavior and learn honeybees from Dr. Tom Seeley. Stay tuned for our next episode. See you next time.